My wife threw a party and invited her entire family to watch me get served divorce papers on my birthday. She laughed like crazy. I didn't say a word, just walked away. 6 months later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 39 missed calls. All from her. I remember the day with perfect clarity. My 34th birthday. Not exactly a milestone, just another year older in what I thought was a relatively normal life with my wife Julie. That morning, Julie had kissed me goodbye with unusual enthusiasm. "Don't forget, I'm planning something special for your birthday tonight," she'd said, her eyes glinting with an excitement I misinterpreted as love. She'd been acting strange for weeks, constantly on her phone, smiling at text messages, being unusually secretive. Like an idiot, I thought maybe she was organizing some surprise party to make up for the tension that had been building between us for months. "Meet me at my parents' house at 7, she texted me that afternoon while I was still at work. I remember staring at that message with confusion. Her parents' mansion in the suburbs was the last place I'd want to celebrate anything. Bronson and Margaret Westfield had made it abundantly clear from day one that I, Todd Mitchell, the scholarship kid from the wrong side of town, was never going to be good enough for their precious daughter. But I was trying to be a good husband. 6 years of marriage, and I was still trying to prove myself to her family. So I finished my work, picked up a bottle of wine on the way, a decent bottle, but nothing that would impress the Westfields with their climate-controlled wine cellar, and drove to their neighborhood of manicured lawns and towering facades. Julie met me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have known right then. "You're here," she chirped, kissing my cheek with the practiced gesture of someone who had already disconnected. The living room was full of people, more than I expected. Her parents, her sister Annabelle, 3 cousins, her aunt and uncle, and several family friends who had always looked at me with that particular blend of pity and disdain. They all held champagne glasses, watching me with anticipation that felt predatory rather than celebratory. "What's all this?" I asked, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Todd," Julie said, stepping back to stand with her family, "we have something special for your birthday." There was a collective intake of breath, like an audience waiting for the climax of a particularly juicy drama. Julie's father Bronson actually snickered, not laughed, but snickered, the sound of pure condescension. Julie pulled out a manila envelope from behind her back. For one confusing moment, I thought maybe they had all pitched in for a vacation, or maybe even the down payment on a house, something to finally help us move from our apartment that Julie kept comparing unfavorably to her cousin Nova's mansion on Instagram. What happened next plays in my memory like a scene from a bad movie. "Surprise," Julie said, her voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. "I'm leaving you for someone who isn't a disappointment." The room went silent except for Bronson, who laughed like Julie had delivered the punchline to a hilarious joke. "We never thought she'd actually marry someone so beneath her," he said, swirling his champagne. "Thank God she finally came to her senses." Julie thrust the envelope into my hands. "Divorce papers. Already filled out. Just waiting for my signature." Margaret Westfield, Julie's mother, actually popped a fresh bottle of champagne and began pouring more glasses. "A toast," she declared, to Julie finally making the right decision. I stood frozen, the envelope heavy in my hands, my mind struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a public execution of my dignity, meticulously planned by the woman I'd loved for nearly a decade. I looked around at the eager faces, all waiting for my reaction, for tears, for begging, for some emotional outburst they could gossip about later. But something strange happened inside me at that moment. It was like watching a glass vase shatter in slow motion, except the vase was my heart, and instead of breaking into pieces, it hardened into something unbreakable. "Can I borrow a pen?" I asked, my voice unnervingly calm. Julie's smile faltered. This wasn't the script she had written. Bronson reached into his jacket pocket and handed me his Mont Blanc fountain pen, the same one he'd once used to point out all the flaws in my career aspirations during a particularly uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner. I walked to their pristine white marble countertop, spread the papers out methodically, and began signing every line without a word. The room was so quiet you could hear the scratch of the pen against paper. Someone coughed awkwardly. Julie shifted her weight from one foot to the other. When I finished, I capped the pen and handed it back to Bronson. "Thanks for the birthday gift," I said, looking directly at Julie. "Best one I've ever received." Then I walked out. No slamming doors. No cursing. No scene. Just the quiet click of the front door closing behind me. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I drove without destination, eventually finding myself at a dive bar where nobody knew me. I ordered whiskey, then another, and stared at my phone as it lit up with Julie's texts. Why didn't you say anything? Are you seriously not going to fight for us? You're just proving my point by running away. 3 drinks in, the numbness began to wear off. What replaced it wasn't the hot flash of anger I expected, but something colder and more calculating. 6 years of marriage to someone from a family that treated household staff like furniture, I'd seen and heard things. The accountant who drank too much at parties and talked about creative bookkeeping. The cousin sleeping with her sister's husband. Bronson's business trips that involved suspiciously few business meetings. I paid my tab and made 3 decisions that night. I called Larry Morrison, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city and, coincidentally, my college roommate's brother-in-law. I spent 2 hours screenshotting every suspicious text Julie had sent or received that I could access through our shared cloud account. I made a list of every business contact and friend who needed to hear my side of the story before Julie's. I didn't go home that night. I crashed at my friend Mike's place, the same Mike that Julie had deemed not refined enough for her social circle after he brought a bottle of grocery store wine to dinner instead of something with a French name and a 3-digit price tag. By morning, my phone had accumulated more texts from Julie, her tone shifting from righteous indignation to confusion. Where are you? You need to come home so we can talk about arrangements. Todd, this is childish. I expected better from you. Hello? Are you ignoring me on purpose? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I met with Larry at 9 a.m. sharp, dressed in yesterday's clothes but with absolute clarity of purpose. So she ambushed you with divorce papers at a party her family threw specifically for that purpose? Larry asked, after I explained the situation. I nodded. And they were drinking champagne to celebrate? Another nod. Larry leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Todd, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never heard anything quite that cold-blooded. The good news is, judges don't look kindly on that kind of behavior. The better news is, I'm going to enjoy making them regret it. By noon, Larry had filed counter paperwork, I'd withdrawn my half from our joint accounts, leaving hers untouched. I'm not stupid, and I'd rented a storage unit where I moved all my important documents and irreplaceable items while Julie was having brunch with her family, probably laughing about how devastated I must be. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, apartment hunting, and rebuilding my life piece by piece. Julie's texts evolved from demanding to incredulous to increasingly desperate. Your lawyer contacted mine? Are you serious right now? Where did you take all your stuff? You can't just take things without discussing it. Todd, please call me. This isn't how this was supposed to go. I found a month-to-month rental, nothing fancy, but it had a small balcony where I could see actual stars at night, something impossible from our old apartment with its view of the neighboring building's brick wall. The first night there, I sat outside with a beer, looked up at the sky, and felt a moment of peace that had been missing from my life for longer than I could remember. 3 weeks after the birthday party, I was sorting through our shared cloud storage, saving photos I wanted to keep, when I discovered a folder labeled Work Presentation. Curious, I clicked on it, and my screen filled with evidence that made my stomach drop and my resolve strengthen all at once. Hundreds of screenshots of texts between Julie and her coworker Ronan dating back 8 months. Pet names, hotel meeting plans, selfies at places Julie had told me she was working late. There were even detailed critiques of our marriage and my shortcomings, with Ronan assuring her she deserved better. I forwarded everything to Larry, who responded with a single text, "Christmas came early this year." I didn't feel the triumph I expected. Just a hollow confirmation that our marriage had been dying long before I knew it was sick. That night, I made 3 new decisions. I would focus on rebuilding myself, not just seeking revenge. I would let the divorce process play out through Larry without direct engagement with Julie. I would start constructing a new life that would eventually make her regret everything. I joined a gym, not because I wanted a revenge body, though I won't lie, that was part of it, but because I needed somewhere to channel my anger. I reconnected with friends Julie had deemed unworthy of our time. I started eating foods I enjoyed but Julie had banned from our apartment for being basic. I bought comfortable furniture instead of the Instagram-worthy but painfully uncomfortable pieces Julie had insisted on. Small rebellions, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The divorce proceedings moved faster than expected. Julie had apparently assumed she'd get half of everything plus alimony, citing sacrificed career opportunities for our marriage. Larry dismantled that argument with surgical precision, presenting evidence that those sacrificed opportunities were hard to prove when she'd spent her work hours sending explicit texts to her coworker. The affair evidence was particularly effective leverage. The Westfields had carefully cultivated an image as pillars of the community. Bronson regularly posted on LinkedIn about family values and integrity in business. The threat of their precious daughter's affair becoming public knowledge during divorce proceedings made them surprisingly amenable to Larry's terms. About 2 months after the birthday party, I returned to our old apartment to collect the last of my belongings. I'd arranged a time when I knew Julie would be at work, but as I was loading the final box into my car, a familiar white Audi pulled into the parking lot. Julie stepped out, looking nothing like the immaculate woman who had handed me divorce papers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, she wore no makeup, and most shockingly, she was dressed in sweatpants, something I'd seen her do maybe twice in our entire relationship. "Todd," she said, her voice catching. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Just getting the last of my stuff," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll be out of your way in a minute." She stepped closer, fidgeting with her car keys. "I've been trying to reach you. You should contact Larry. He's handling everything. Not about the divorce. About us." She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake, Todd. A huge mistake. Ronan isn't who I thought he was. He's been..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "Maybe we could talk? About reconciliation?" I looked at this woman, the same one who had humiliated me in front of her entire family, who had cheated for months while gaslighting me about working late, who had called me a disappointment as she served me divorce papers on my birthday, and felt absolutely nothing. "I'll have my attorney contact yours if you have anything to discuss," I said, closing my trunk and walking around to the driver's side. "That's it?" she asked, her voice rising. "After 6 years of marriage, you're not even willing to have a conversation?" I paused with my hand on the door handle. "You didn't want a conversation when you handed me divorce papers in front of an audience. You wanted a performance. Well, the show's over, Julie." The look on her face, pure bewilderment that I wasn't falling to my knees with gratitude for this second chance, told me everything about how she viewed our relationship. I had always been the supporting character in the Julie show, expected to follow whatever script she wrote. I got in my car and drove away, my rearview mirror showing her standing alone in the parking lot, looking lost in a way I'd never seen before. 3 months after the birthday party, my life had taken on a rhythm that felt increasingly comfortable. The divorce was nearly finalized, no alimony, thanks to the affair evidence, and we were selling the apartment and splitting proceeds, though I let her keep most of the furniture since I was starting fresh. I'd reconnected with old friends Julie had deemed unsuitable. Mike, the grocery store wine friend, and I now had weekly game nights with a growing group of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company without cataloging every gathering for social media. I started a small side business customizing vintage furniture, something I'd always enjoyed but Julie had dismissed as tacky garage sale flipping. Nothing huge, just Etsy sales that brought in some extra cash and, more importantly, creative satisfaction. My first sale netted $27 after expenses, but seeing the buyer's excited review gave me a rush of pride I hadn't felt in years. In a development that felt almost too perfect to be coincidental, Julie's family business had hit some serious snags. Their high-end real estate development company lost a major investor right after I had lunch with my old college roommate Derek, who now worked for that investor's firm. Did I mention anything specific about the Westfields during that lunch? No. Did I accept Derek's LinkedIn connection request afterward? Absolutely. Annabelle, Julie's sister and the only decent Westfield, reached out to me one Tuesday evening. "I probably shouldn't be calling you," she said, her voice hushed like someone might be listening. "Yet here we are," I replied, not unkindly. Annabelle had always been polite to me, even if she never quite stood up to her family on my behalf. "Julie's a mess, Todd. Ronan dumped her after Dad tried to buy him a better position at their company. Turns out he was only interested in her for the family connections." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, realizing with surprise that I genuinely meant it. Not because I wanted Julie back, but because nobody deserves to be used like that. "There's more," Annabelle continued. "Dad's business is under investigation. Something about financial irregularities that Ronan exposed after the breakup. They've had to downsize dramatically while the investigation continues." I couldn't help the small, bitter laugh that escaped me. Karma has a hell of a sense of timing. "I know you probably don't care, but Julie really regrets what happened. She talks about you all the time. Her Instagram used to be all humble brags about her blessed life, now she doesn't post at all. I had noticed. Meanwhile, I'd been posting occasional updates, hiking trips, furniture projects, nights out with friends. Nothing flashy, just moments from a normal, happy life. Julie's best friend had accidentally liked one of my photos at 2 a.m., then quickly unliked it, so I knew they were watching. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this call, Annabelle?" I asked. She sighed. I don't know. Maybe I just thought you should know. Or maybe. She hesitated. Maybe I thought you might talk to her. She's not the same person who did that awful thing to you.
Neither am I said simply.
That's what divorce does to people. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, thinking about how differently things had turned out from what Julie had planned. She had expected to humiliate me, take half my assets, and ride off into the sunset with Ronan. Instead, she was alone, her reputation damaged, her family business struggling. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired of carrying the weight of it all. That night, what would have been our anniversary, I was scrolling through Twitter, half watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures, when my phone lit up with a text from Julie. I know you probably hate me, but I can't stop thinking about where we would be if I hadn't ruined everything. I miss your terrible jokes and the way you always made coffee for both of us even when we were fighting. The apartment feels so empty now. Ronan was a mistake. My family was wrong. I was wrong. Please, can we just talk? I'm not above begging at this point. I stared at that text for a full hour, typed and deleted about 15 different responses. 3 months ago, I would have given anything to get a message like that from her. Now, I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. The anger was still there, but less consuming, like a fire burning down to embers. In the end, I put my phone down without replying and went to bed. I woke to 5 more messages, each more desperate than the last. The final one just said, "I'm parked outside your building. Please come down." I looked out my window, and sure enough, there was her white Audi in the visitor parking. She sat inside, looking up at the building. I closed the blinds and made coffee, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Another part thought opening that door even a crack would undo all the progress I'd made. And a small, petty part that I'm not proud of wanted her to feel exactly what I felt that day at her parents' house. I did nothing, and eventually, she drove away. Exactly 6 months after the birthday party from hell, I had moved again, this time to a small 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood with an actual yard. I'd finally fulfilled a dream Julie always vetoed, adopting a dog. Max, a 3-legged rescue pit bull with soulful eyes and an addiction to stealing socks, had become the best roommate I'd ever had. The divorce had been finalized 2 months earlier with surprisingly little drama in the end. Julie's family lawyer folded once Larry presented the evidence of the affair. My furniture side hustle had grown enough to fund my coffee addiction and pay for streaming services, and I'd even started dating, nothing serious yet, but I'd had dinner 3 times with Mia, an interior designer who had purchased one of my refurbished console tables and reached out to compliment my work. It was a Thursday night like any other. I had ordered pizza, was watching a new series everyone was talking about. Honestly, it was mediocre, but I was too invested to stop, when my Ring doorbell notification went off at 11:30 p.m. I checked it, expecting a neighbor who'd had too much to drink, instead seeing Julie's white Audi parked across the street, lights off. I ignored it and tried to focus on my show, but couldn't concentrate knowing she was out there. An hour later, I checked again, the car hadn't moved. That's when my phone started lighting up with texts. "Todd, please. I know you're home. I just need 5 minutes. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Please answer." And the one that actually got me out of bed, "I've been sleeping in my car for 2 days. I have nowhere else to go." I went to the window and looked out. I could see her reclined in the driver's seat of her Audi, the same car her father had bought her for her 25th birthday that she once told me was just entry-level despite costing more than I made in 6 months. I debated what to do. Part of me, the petty part, wanted to close the blinds and let her enjoy her car camping experience. But despite everything, I'm not actually a monster. I threw on sweats and a hoodie and went outside. When I tapped on her window, she jolted awake, her face a mess of smeared makeup and unwashed hair. She was wearing what looked like the same clothes from her last Instagram post 3 days earlier. As she scrambled to unlock the door, I caught the unmistakable smell of someone who had been living in their car, stale fast food and desperation. "Todd," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank you for coming down." I stepped back as she got out of the car, noticing how much weight she'd lost. Julie had always been thin, but now she looked almost gaunt, her cheekbones sharp enough to cast shadows in the streetlight. "It's late, Julie. What do you want?" She started talking rapidly, words tumbling out between half sobs. It took me a minute to make sense of the story, but eventually I pieced it together. Ronan, the guy she'd left me for, hadn't just been sleeping with Julie, he'd been using her to get insider information about her family's business. When Bronson discovered this, he fired Ronan, who promptly dumped Julie and disappeared with a trove of confidential documents. But the story got worse. Julie, in what she called a moment of blind love, had been covering for Ronan at work, altering reports to make his numbers look better. When everything came to light, Bronson had finally had enough and cut her off completely. No more job at the family business, no more allowance, no more paid apartment. She'd been couch surfing with friends for weeks but had burned through everyone's goodwill. Her last roommate had kicked her out for not paying rent, which is how she ended up sleeping in her car outside my house. "Why not go to your parents?" I asked, genuinely curious. That's when she dropped the bomb that her father's business was under investigation for financial improprieties that Ronan had exposed. Their assets were temporarily frozen, and they'd had to downsize dramatically while the investigation continued. The karmic justice was almost too perfect. "Can we talk inside?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the night chill. "Please, Todd. I have nowhere else to go." I hesitated, then nodded. Not because I was considering taking her back, but because it was cold, and I didn't need a hypothermic X on my conscience. Inside, Max greeted us with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging so hard his entire back half swung from side to side. Julie stared at him with obvious surprise. "You got a dog?" she asked, as if this was the most inconceivable development of all. "This is Max," I said, watching as he sniffed curiously at Julie's expensive shoes. She looked around my living room, taking in the comfortable furniture, the thriving plants, the half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. Tears welled in her eyes again. "Your place looks really nice," she said softly. I made coffee while she talked. The full story came pouring out, how her parents had pressured her into the divorce after finding out about Ronan, convincing her she could trade up while taking half my assets, how they'd planned the whole birthday ambush as a way to humiliate me so I'd sign quickly without fighting, how she'd realized within weeks that she'd made a terrible mistake, but her pride kept her from admitting it. "I thought you'd fight for me," she said, staring into her coffee cup. I couldn't help but laugh, not meanly, just at the absurdity of it all. "You orchestrate this public humiliation, tell me I'm a disappointment, serve me divorce papers on my birthday, and expected me to what? Beg you to reconsider? Write a heartfelt letter about how I couldn't live without you?" She looked up, her expression painfully earnest. "Something like that, yes." "What do you want from me now, Julie?" I asked. More tears, then she laid it out. She wanted to try again. She'd learned her lesson and grown as a person in the past 6 months. She had nowhere to go, no money, no job prospects. Her expensive business degree was useless without her father's connections. She thought maybe she could move in with me while we figured things out. I let her finish, then did something that surprised even me. I thanked her. "For what?" she asked, confused. "For the divorce," I said simply. "For showing me exactly who you and your family were. For forcing me to rebuild my life on my own." Her face crumpled. "I don't understand." "The past 6 months have been hard," I explained, "but also weirdly liberating. For the first time since college, I'm making choices based on what I want, not what would please you or impress your family. I have a dog that sheds all over everything. I make furniture that your dad would call a hobby for poor people. I eat pizza in front of the TV without a coaster under my drink." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head, then came more tears and bargaining. She'd do anything to fix things. She'd changed. She'd never appreciated what she had. "You can crash on my couch for tonight," I said, "because it's late and I'm not sending anyone out to sleep in their car. But in the morning, you need to figure out your next steps, steps that don't involve me." The look of shock on her face was almost comical. I don't think Julie had ever been told no in her entire life. Morning came, and I made breakfast because that's just what decent humans do. While we were eating, her phone rang. It was her father. She put it on speaker, habit, I guess, and I heard Bronson's voice for the first time since the birthday party. Gone was the smug condescension, replaced by something I'd never heard from him before: desperation. Their business was barely hanging on. Investors were pulling out left and right. They needed help from someone with connections in the industry, and Julie had mentioned I'd been doing well. He actually asked if I would consider meeting with him to discuss potential opportunities for mutual benefit. I almost choked on my coffee. The same man who had laughed at me for being beneath his daughter was now practically begging for my help. Julie looked at me with a weird mix of hope and embarrassment. I told Bronson I wasn't interested in any business arrangements with him, but I knew someone who might be able to help: Mia, the woman I'd been seeing for the past month. She specialized in helping struggling businesses rebuild their reputation. There was a long silence on the phone, then Bronson asked for her contact information. I gave it to him, ended the call, and looked at Julie. The realization was dawning on her face that not only was I not taking her back, but I'd moved on. She left an hour later with a backpack of essentials and an Uber to her sister Annabelle's place, who'd agreed to let her stay temporarily. As she was leaving, she asked if I would ever forgive her. I already have, I told her, not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger was exhausting, and I have furniture to refinish and a dog to walk. As I watched her Uber drive away, Max leaning against my leg, I felt the last of the bitterness finally leave me. 6 months from champagne celebrating my devastation to sleeping in her car outside my house, life comes at you fast. I don't know what happens next for Julie. I hope she figures her life out. I hope her family learns something from all this. But mostly, I'm just looking forward to all the things I never got to do when I was trying to fit into their world, traveling without worrying about luxury accommodations, making furniture without being told it's embarrassing, getting a dog that sheds all over everything. Sometimes the end of something you thought you wanted turns out to be the beginning of something you actually need. Sometimes what feels like devastation is really just demolition, clearing the ground so you can build something better. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma shows up right on time, with a 3-legged dog and the keys to a better life.